Okay, welcome back. This is part 3 of the review of syllabus, and like part 2, I'm covering both drawing 1 and design 1 kind of simultaneously because the content is very similar. On the last video, we didn't actually get to look at the assignments for the drawing 1 class, so I'm just going to look at them and talk about them very briefly. Most of this will make sense. There are sketchbook assignments, right? Those are where you work in your sketchbook. And the thing about sketchbook practice assignments is usually it's kind of a list of things to do, and it usually covers about 3 or 4 pages of sketchbook work per week. And then there are the studies grade and the folios grade, or you don't have to worry about. That's basically comes from when you turn in a folio, you get a grade just for the overall folio. Um, the homework assignment should make sense. Those are larger drawings, usually kind of like about the 12 by 16 type size drawings usually on an 18 by 24 size piece of paper. And they are done almost entirely at home, usually completely at home, but they're based on what we're doing in class. And then the drawing assignments are on an 18 by 24 piece of paper, and they are works that we do um, in class primarily, but also um, outside of class time where you come into the studio and finish. Some of the drawings you might be able to finish at home if we can design things where you can take still life objects and set them up at home. But some of them are going to require you to come to the studio. And we'll talk about setting up studio times as well for the drawing class. Okay, besides that, that's pretty much very similar to what's in the design class. So for the two classes, for design and drawing, I want to talk about these sections D all the way through K, although not really talking about attendance that much since we covered that in the last lecture. And so the first thing I want to say, like from academic integrity, Title IX, Americans with Disabilities Act, right? And then the COVID related ones, as well as the Canvas and change of syllabus statements. These are statements that are designed by MUW, and most of these are required to be in every syllabus. And there's a reason for that, and you should make sure that you read them and read them multiple times, since this is information that's relevant for all of your classes, and you should really pay attention to them. Smarter minds than I have worked really hard as a committee to design these statements and to reform and revise these statements year after year. And they're important, and they are content that can really assist you in your path through your college education. So just because these are committee design statements, do not ignore them. They are extremely important. Now, I have some things I want to say about them, but I'm not going to go through them line by line, but I expect you to read them very carefully. So besides the fact that they are important, some other things I want to cover are um, with the academic integrity statement. One of the things I want to say is that, I guess what I want to say is that if you've ever been on the if you ever been on the Academic Integrity Council or had to deal with any of these kind of issues, you will realize that these are serious issues and they can be quite painful. So you never want to be on the other side of this, right? And it's not hard, really, it's not hard to avoid problems. The main way that you avoid problems is by just making sure to always cite anytime you borrow someone else's ideas or work, right? And if you do that, whether it's in a document or if you do it in a work of art, then in general, you should be fine. Okay, so how can academic dishonesty become an issue in a studio class like design or in drawing? Um, well, there are some ways. I mean, like the most serious way would be like if you asked someone else to do an assignment for you, right? And if you got caught doing that, that would be an extremely serious issue of academic integrity, and we'd have to deal with it. But another way where academic dishonesty could be a problem would be like, let's say, if you were doing an independent project and you made a work based off of some other artist's artwork, and then you never told anyone that this work that you made was based off of someone else's artwork. So if you can imagine two artists, one who wanted to make a work of art based off of, let's say, Vuillard. This student loved Vuillard, and so she made a design or a drawing based off of Vuillard. She came to the professor, me, to talk about it, and we discussed, how we're going to do a study based off of Vuillard, and and we talked about in what ways maybe she could make it her own. That student would not get into any trouble, even if in the end she made as close as she could an exact copy of the Vuillard painting that she was looking at. Whereas another student who was looking at a different artist, maybe an artist that this student hoped no one would know, like a contemporary illustrator or somebody, and made a work based of this other artist, and then never spoke to the faculty member about the fact that they were doing a study that was a strict copy of someone else's artwork, then presented the artwork in class and never mentioned it in the critique that it was a strict copy of someone else's artwork. That could be a problem of academic dishonesty. Okay, does everyone understand the difference? Okay, good. Um, so on on the Title IX and the American Disabilities Act, I think the they're both extremely important, and I think that it's critical that you read these multiple times. The main thing I want to emphasize in terms of how it relates to my class is that it is my goal that my classes be an accommodating and considerate and kind space, right? Of literally a safe space for everyone who is there, right? Because I teach studio classes, right? Because studio classes involve people getting to know each other, right? When it's, when you're working in a studio space, you wind up talking with people. It is a much more friendly, a much more social environment than most classes that you might be in. And because of that, right, it is also more important that we all make sure that we stay as considerate and as kind as possible with each other, that we are aware of, how our actions might negatively affect the other people in our class, right? And it's also really important that students come to me with any concerns about anything I might have said or done, or concerns about anything any other student may have said or done, right? It is really important because, once again, it is my goal that the space that we create in our class be as considerate and as kind and as forgiving, right, as possible for everyone. Okay. Um, so, and now because of COVID, right, we have two extra statements that have been added that I want to cover. How much time do I have? Oh, I only have a minute. Um, and the main thing I want to say is that we have because we are an in-person class, but a hybrid course, we have some very definite rules. We have some COVID rules for this class, and you need to follow them carefully. But you also need to be aware that things might change, whether that might change for one student, where a student has to um, finish the class entirely online, or whether the whole class has to finish the class entirely online, that you have to be prepared for that. All right. Lastly, the Canvas statement relates to the COVID in this case because a lot of this content will be on Canvas. So you need to be using Canvas and paying attention to it. And the change of syllabus also is important, in part because, like what we learned last spring, sometimes major changes have to happen. Okay, that's where we're going to end for right now. And then the last part will be broken up between the two classes.